What is happening, guys? How are you doing? This is Rob of Ro2R Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today we are talking yet again about more new Switch hardware. Yep, it turns out that there's more Switch hardware to talk about. Not even a week after the reveal of the Nintendo Switch Lite, Nintendo also confirmed that there's more Switch hardware being released, a revision to the original current Switch, basically to this bad boy, the one that pretty much all of us have. It's pretty crazy to have so much stuff going on in the world of Nintendo actual hardware. And I'm also quite a few days late to this topic, which is sometimes just the nature of doing this stuff part-time. But I do have a couple of thoughts, obviously. And like I said, it is a big deal, so I really kind of want to discuss what's going on here. So I have no doubt that all of you guys pretty much already know what's going on here. That's kind of what happens when you're a couple of days late to this kind of stuff. Nintendo has now decided to release, again, after the reveal of the Switch Lite, which was what we all thought was going to be the Switch Mini for so long, that they're updating the current Switch hardware, and the real main thing that they're doing here with this update is actually finally adding a significantly longer battery life, which is very exciting. That's something that pretty much we've all wanted ever since the Switch first came out, and we all realized how freaking awesome it was to have a Nintendo home console that also doubles as a portable. And the battery life has been something that really people haven't been satisfied with from the beginning because, you know, you're averaging whatever 3.5 hours or so playing most games portably. Now, I think it should be noted that most people, I don't think, are actually playing their Switch portably until the battery depletes. You know, I'm willing to bet, and I know maybe one or two of you out there might be the one exception, and so you're going to just start yelling at me for saying this, but I'm willing to bet the overwhelming majority, to the point of like 98% of people who are playing their Switch portably ever, are probably like charging that thing intermittently throughout their play sessions. I mean, I can't imagine most people sitting down away from their dock or away from a plug where it's plugged into the wall for 3, 4, 5 hours at a time just playing portably. I just don't think that most people are doing that. So I don't think that the average person plays that thing down to the point where they're like, oh my god, my Switch is dying, or my Switch died, and now I can't play anymore. If only I could charge it, if only it had a better battery life. I know that most of us aren't doing that, but at the end of the day, I still think it's important to have a significantly longer battery life than what Nintendo had been giving us, so an update like this is definitely very welcome. So the kind of purpose of this video and what I really wanted to get at with this topic is discussing if Nintendo is mishandling, so to speak, what they're doing with new Nintendo Switch hardware. And I think that because it's been such a constant conversation about what Nintendo has been doing with the Switch, that it felt like an important discussion to have with you guys, you know? Initially, when the Switch launched, no one ever really considered the idea of Nintendo changing or upgrading it. But by the end of probably that first year or so, I think that is when we started to hear conversations and kind of get some ideas in our heads about whether or not Nintendo would do basically what they are doing. You know, and I think that the main reason a lot of us started to think about upgraded Switch hardware or mini portable-only Switch hardware, stuff like that, is two reasons. One is Sony and Microsoft had already upgraded their consoles to the PlayStation 4 Pro and to the Xbox One X, and so people thought that, hey, maybe Nintendo might need to do the same thing, especially when you look at the fact that the Switch is underpowered even compared to the base PS4 and Xbox One. The other reason I think a lot of us thought that is because, you know, we all know this, Nintendo's done this stuff before, mostly with their handhelds. How many updates to the Game Boy did they make, the Pocket and the Color? The Game Boy Advance had SPs and micros and all these different things. And then, of course, the DS and the DSi and the DS Lite, the 3DS, the new 3DS, the 3DS XL, the 2DS, the 2DS XL, new 2DS. I mean, they've done that stuff a jillion times. And occasionally with their hardware in the past, the NES had updates, the Wii had updates with the Wii Mini and stuff. So I think that within that kind of first year of the Switch, that's when a lot of us started to realize it could make sense for Nintendo to do this. In fact, we started to expect Nintendo to do it. Then, over the course of the past 7 or 8 months is when things went crazy, because that's when actual legitimate rumors started to come out, and people with behind-the-scenes sources started to say, I've heard that Nintendo is planning on changing the Switch. I've heard that they're going to do a Switch Pro, an updated Switch, you know, significantly more graphics and power capability. I've heard that they're doing a Mini. and some sort of, smaller form factor version of the Switch. And so that's made it so that this past almost year has just been crazy with rumors about what Nintendo is doing. Should we expect an upgrade to the Switch or not? And now that we've seen the Switch Lite confirmed, and as I even discussed recently, very controversial, very, very divisive, the introduction of the Switch, we now get only a couple of days later this whole thing about basically upgrading the battery life, but not giving us anything that seems to be a Switch Pro, which a lot of people, including, outlets like Forbes and Wall Street Journals of the world, have talked about actually happening, something that makes new games available on the Switch that previously the Switch couldn't play. We instead see this upgraded battery version, and so it gives us a reason to kind of look at what Nintendo is doing here and see if it's the right stuff. Are they mishandling all of these new devices? Are they missing an opportunity, or are they doing it the perfect and the fine and the right way? I feel like, just my own kind of opinion with what they're doing here, while I think a lot of people might see what they're doing as a mishandling, I don't want to necessarily myself use that word, because I think mishandling sounds a little bit too harsh. I do think that everything that they're doing isn't necessarily the best way to do it or the greatest, but I don't think it's going to make a negative impact on the company, on the quality of their hardware, or on people who are interested in buying the Switch in any of these different versions. And I think that's why I don't want to use the word mishandling, because again, it just sounds too negative for what they're doing. I do think that, gosh, how many times have I had to discuss this now, the Switch Lite? I don't love it. I'm not interested in it. I was hoping for something more, for something better for me to want to spend my money on. So I do think that while it's a slightly disappointing piece of hardware, as I've said numerous times, even on a podcast recently, I was on the Ham Radio podcast, we talked about this, I do think that it's going to be successful. And I do think it looks like a typical Nintendo well-made device. I think it is going to be a well-built machine. And while I do think some people might get kind of tricked or trapped into picking this thing up and end up missing the ability to play on the TV and feel like they blew $200 on the wrong Switch device, I still think that the majority of people who go into it knowing what it is are going to be very happy with it. And it's going to sell well and make Nintendo money and strengthen the Switch brand. So whereas I see it as a disappointment, I do think it's also going to be successful. And that absolutely counts for something. So again, mishandling the reveal and the decision to make the Switch Lite wouldn't feel right. But a disappointing piece of hardware, yeah, I do see it as that. Now, the Nintendo Switch device that upgrades the battery life, is that being mishandled? Is that good or bad? That probably veers closer to me wanting to say that it's being mishandled. Overall, I just feel like, while it's good to see this because it's something that we all want, it feels like it's both too little too late and also the wrong way to go about this. And part of my opinion there does have to do with the fact that I'm still tending to believe a Switch Pro, whatever that thing turns out to be called, is probably still coming. Nothing is fact or confirmed. I'm just going off my own gut feeling here. And I'm not trying to share this behind-the-scenes secret info that I have about this. I've heard some things, but that has nothing really to do with that. It's just more that I think it makes sense, and I think that seeing Nintendo reveal a Nintendo Switch Lite kind of shows us, in my opinion, that they're also still planning on going the opposite direction and making some sort of upgrade. As I've said over the past few weeks, I do think that upgrading the Switch to a Pro status will get some extra legs out of the console. I'll reiterate for like the 10th time, I don't think it's to combat the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Scarlet, because a Switch Pro ain't gonna be any sort of competition directly to those. But I do think that it's going to help Nintendo get another year or two out of the Switch once we get to the end of the Switch's life, Whereas maybe the Switch would have to be done by 2021, maybe now it can make it to 2023 or something with the Switch Pro before Nintendo moves on to the successor console, something that is meant to combat directly the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Scarlet. And so, with that being my opinion, it means that when I look at this new Switch where they just kind of are shoving this thing out that happens to have a better battery life, it does feel kind of wrong. I guess I don't really know what words to use. It just, it feels weird. And obviously there's been a lot of conversation about people who maybe have just purchased a Switch in the last, month or couple of months. They finally were like, oh, I'm ready to go. Here's my Nintendo Switch, $300. I finally have one. Only to find out that now Nintendo is making this one with a better battery life. And so people who've only recently bought in might feel kind of disappointed or kind of screwed over, so to speak. And I kind of get that. I don't think that they're wrong. I mean, if I was that person, I would be like, God damn it, Nintendo. I just gave you $300 and now you're doing a new battery life kind of situation. You know, to be fair, if you're going to do anything like that, there's almost no good time to announce it, because whenever you announce a new device, there's always going to be those recent adopters that get screwed over. To be fair, same thing with the PlayStation 4 Pro, same thing with the Xbox One X. Imagine if you bought your PlayStation 4 3 weeks before Sony announced the PlayStation 4 Pro. You'd be like, frickin' damn it, Sony, I just gave you $400 for a PlayStation 4. Now I know there's a better version coming. You know, you just screwed me over. And so this is like universal across the board, and it's like if you're gonna decide to change the battery life on the Switch, to make an Xbox One X with 4K, best, you know, most powerful console on the market kind of thing, it's always going to be announced at a time where some people feel screwed over. And so to me, it has to do with, do we allow companies to make the decision to do these things, or do we say they should never do it for that small group of people that could feel screwed over? You know, 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would have told you I felt that they should never do something like that. But hey, I'm a human whose opinions and feelings on these things are organic and they grow and evolve over time. And now, a few years later, I'm a little bit more open to the idea, and I do see the value of One X's and Pros and Switch Pros and upgraded batteries. I see the advantages, like improve your hardware always. That's a good thing. And so at the end of the day, I think it's fine for Sony and Microsoft to have done it. I think it's fine for Nintendo to reveal a Switch Lite and to maybe go into Switch Pro territory. I think that that's cool. The battery life thing is weird because it just seems like what they're doing is they've decided to improve this one issue with the Switch, which is a very small battery life, and just sort of slowly and organically make it the version of the Switch that's on the market, right? That's what they're doing. It's not like, hey, it's a whole new device. Get ready to just buy the brand new Switch that we've changed everything on. I heard something like they've changed the packaging on the box and stuff, but really, and like, I guess the serial number lets you know if it's the older Switch or the newer Switch, the upgraded battery life Switch. But all they're really doing is just replacing what's on the market with this better version. And like, that's good, that's smart, you know, they were kind of in a tricky situation, I think, no matter which direction they tried to go with this. Once they decided to take the current Switch as it is and only improve this battery life situation, I mean, there really almost isn't any other way for them to be doing this. You have to announce it at some point just because you have to let people know, and you have to get it out in the market. So if you're just going to make it the newer version available on store shelves, then that is what it is. It'll be interesting to see how people go about buying Nintendo Switches, because you'd think at some point both the older versions with poor battery and the newer versions with better battery are going to exist on store shelves at the same time. So do people have to decide, you know, ask, hey, I want the one with the better battery life, and if the store is like, we're out of those, we only have the old ones, are people going to be forced to buy those? Are they going to decide to hold off? They're going to say, I'd rather save my $300 until you have the better battery life version? It's weird. It's just very weird, potentially confusing. Not so much going into segregating the market territory like a Pro would do, but it is weird. And so I think that Nintendo and consumers are going to have to kind of figure that out for themselves. So at the end of the day, these are just kind of some of my feelings and opinions on this whole thing. It's very interesting. Is Nintendo mishandling what they're doing here with new Switch hardware? No, I don't think mishandling, but are they making this a little bit confusing and a little bit tough for some people to decide which direction they should go, what they should buy if they want to buy a Switch right now today? Are they waiting? Are they not waiting? And then what maybe should we expect in the future? I mean, a Switch Pro coming out next year potentially screws over anyone who buys a Switch in 2019, let alone the fact that Switch Lites and better battery switches are on their way too. So it's just... man, I don't know. It's just weird, right? It's just freaking weird, and it's tough to know how to feel. But still fun for me to kind of just break this down a little bit and discuss with you guys and share my thoughts and opinions. So, you know, at the end of the day, obviously, I want to hear from you guys. Do you understand what I'm saying? How do you feel about what Nintendo's doing with new Switch hardware? And what do you maybe expect for them to do in the future? Are they screwing people over? Are they not screwing people over? Are they mishandling this? Are they not mishandling this? Could go 100 different ways, man. So yeah, I guess talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.